Welcome to this presentation of the paper, The Selfish Vision, Addressing the Problematic Lack of Explicit Discourse and Ethical Contract in Corporate Design Fictions. I'm Peter Vistesen. I'm Associate Professor at Aalborg University, and I am presenting this paper in correspondence with my good colleague Tessa Jensen, also Associate Professor at Aalborg University. And one of the sort of overarching interests we've had in the last couple of years has been this emerging field of design fiction, coined by Bruce Sterling and other researchers later on, as sort of the deliberate use of what's called diegetic prototypes to suspend disbelief about change. And now this is an interesting thing in sort of an Ethicomp context here, because we have the deliberation. It is something that we do with a specific intent to explore, to actually do something about a technology which does not maybe exist yet in reality, but exists inside some kind of speculative scenario where we want to explore it before actually realizing it. And we do it to suspend disbelief. So we have an audience. We have an audience that we want to actually immerse themselves in this, react to it, reflect on it. But we also do it in order to make them reflect upon some kind of change, a proposed change, basically. There is also a lot of ethics and a lot of discussions that we can take in this. One of the really early examples of design fiction was made by people like James Auger in the Great Britain, like this one, where they actually just made a mock-up of a tooth with communication hardware embedded. And it sprung out of control and created discourse in the media, and people really reacted to this product as though it was real, sparking a lot of discussions about embedding technology in our body. And now in the years since, design fiction has sort of emerged into not just being traditional design artifacts, but also being in the form of what we call a vision video. That is a genre of moving images in which we use externalizations to actually portray these design fictions, to sort of propose and show how a value proposition of a company, etc., for example, could be in a couple of years, or how it should not be in a couple of years. So basically speculate about a more strategic level. One of my favorite examples of this is Kiichi Matsuda's Hyperreality. It's a design fiction made a couple of years ago, sort of exploring the question of what if we do not regulate augmented reality glasses and augmented reality surfaces in cityscapes. What would happen, both good and bad potentially, if we did not regulate that? It's a wonderful design fiction, and I would strongly urge you to follow the link below and see it in its full. It has some really interesting ethical sort of dilemmas portrayed in this strength of the medium of just using diegetic simulations of technology to discuss technology. And I think that's one of the great strengths about design fiction, that it enables us to basically divert from science fiction. We're using some of the same mediums, video, special effects, etc., but we're sort of setting the stage in a much more near future, daily life problems, and speculate upon what should actually be designed instead of these dystopic and utopian ideas traditionally associated with sci-fi. So in that turn, the world that we try to explore through design fiction has a much more realistic discourse. And maybe that is also why that we have seen in recent years that many corporations have actually sort of adopted this vision video. With the emergence of social media in the last 2 decades, we've also seen that these kind of visions in video format can get sort of a life on their own. They create discourses out on the World Wide Web, both on social media, and they are spread across channels. They are picked up by media outlet, by bloggers, and by end users, creating and sparking discussions. And that's really where the main focus of our paper comes into the picture. What happens in this mix between some of them clearly being meant to be externalized, something that companies promote themselves with, versus the cases where they are actually internal videos used by developers and strategists inside a technology company to reflect internally. And that's actually the sort of the way this medium was used initially, and where it had initially also been used most critically and actually used to discuss ethical factors. But what happens when this internal discourse through social media and other ways finds its way into the externalized context of Facebook, YouTube, etc.? What happens when that discoursive space changes? And what happens if you as a company or as a design researcher have not explicitly stated what the purpose of your speculation actually is? That is sort of our main concern in the paper. And we use this
user-centered design principles have
this
dominated
video
the world
here
of computing for
from
many decades.
Google
But what if we looked at things
as our
a little bit
case,
differently?
in which
What if the
Google
ledger could be given a volitional
in
purpose
2018
rather than simply used as an
proposed
historical
sort of
What if we focus
a
on the
concept
ritual
for what about if they could use all the data they had collected upon their user throughout the ages and actually create a system where data could be inherited between generations of families or generations of users. And in this 8-minute long video that I will encourage you to see in full length, they explore different aspects of what this can actually mean. And this was a leaked video. It was used internally by Google. They actually had some design researchers hired to facilitate these discussions, to actually maybe discuss also and provoke what is the potential pitfalls of what Google can do with all of the data. But since it was leaked, it suddenly spun out of control and became part of the blogosphere. The Verge, Mashable, different online mediums picked up the story, and they had to begin to actually retract from it, saying, okay, it is actually not a product that we're thinking about making here. So it really got sort of a backslash. And ironically, a half a year later, they also dissolved their own AI ethics board, because as people simply kept referring to that they had a lot of things going on behind the carpet that they weren't talking publicly about. And they also owned the patents for actually doing this kind of stuff. So in our analysis in the paper, we sort of begin to dive into this. We dive into the user reflections on this video, what discourses actually formed, what could have been done. This video doesn't state that this is not a product that Google is actually pursuing actively. So we actually propose in the paper sort of a storytelling model of vision videos, where you have your characters, you have your plot for the technology vision, but you also need to include subplots that explicitly state the ethics, explicitly state that this is not real, this is a proposal, and we want to discuss these questions with whomever will watch this video. And thus it actually becomes what we call an ethical contract, where the first point is that you have a narrative, you need to state what the vision is and what discursive space is meant to be, and then you need to acknowledge the formation of culture around it. If it becomes leaked or if other people react to it, you need to be prepared to actually discuss with the audiences and prepare to communicate and actually have their reflections taken seriously. Summing up the video here, our key takeaways basically is that creating an ethical contract for vision videos is just much about giving the receiver a framing to read the speculation through, and about inviting them for debate and critique, rather than just using it as a piece of flashy marketing, because it will backfire if you do not explicitly state your ethical sort of contract in the discursive space. And depending on the nature of whatever vision you're showing, this contract also needs to be really clear cut from the start, so you don't distort the discourse, but promote the discourse, promote the questions you want to ask. And we propose in the paper 2 sort of strategies for doing this: either stating it very explicitly in the beginning, as this is a virtual prototype, but this is something that we're conceptually thinking about, or more actively, maybe in the end of a video, ask the what if questions in the video itself. Put it up for discussion instead of just stating that this is something you're thinking about. Then actually promote questions in the end to make people continue the discussion after they have watched the video. I guess that was that. That was a quick walkthrough of our paper, the selfish vision. Feel free to contact me or my colleague Tessa throughout the conference. We are looking forward to see the other presentations, and stay safe out there and have a very nice Ethicomp virtual.